Donald Trump is blindsided as the CIA is turning against him at a rapidly accelerating pace. The CIA has been able to not only identify how compromised the Trump regime is, but they've been able to leak critical stories to the press to demonstrate, for example, how Israel has been able to capture the Trump regime by running intelligence operations against Steve Witkoff, Elbridge Colby, Michael Domino, and other key people in the Trump regime. Also, we have top CIA officials quitting and resigning. I'll talk about that in a bit. And also leaking how American military infrastructure is destroyed and how that's being covered up by the Pentagon. Let's just get into it right now. So here's the story from the New York Times. Pentagon sees growing espionage threat from Israel. The Defense Department has increased its counterintelligence threat assessment to its highest level, and Israel is believed to have eavesdropped on American negotiations with Iran. The Pentagon's denying this. The White House is denying this. Where do you think this data is coming from right here? Because I think the CIA has felt that they've been undermined every step of the way when they've given Donald Trump all of the correct intelligence. They're saying about the Strait of Hormuz was going to be closed. Iran was not capable of utilizing or building any nuclear weapon in late February when Netanyahu and Donald Trump decided to invade Iran. And at every turn, Donald Trump is rejecting the CIA's guidance, what the CIA feels, and instead Donald Trump has created his own silo, elevating ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, and now bringing in Bill Pulte, this partisan hack trust fund kid with no intelligence experience, in order to basically infiltrate at the highest levels our intelligence community information. Also, I want to tie this together as well with the arrest of a CIA agent who was found to have tens of millions of dollars worth of gold bars at his home. And he was basically a protege, it seems, of one of these top Trump officials as well. And so to me, that arrest surfacing at a time where CIA agents identified what was happening, and there may be links to the Trump regime there. I'll talk about that in a moment. So here's one of the things that we know. Pentagon is raising its Israel espionage threat to critical, the highest level, which is above the highest level from some of America's adversaries in terms of the spying taking place. The Defense Intelligence Agency raising its counterintelligence threat assessment for Israel to critical, its highest level, now higher than any other U.S. ally and above some adversarial nations after U.S. personnel in Israel found spyware installed on their phones, the New York Times reports. Israel is believed to have eavesdropped on U.S.-Iran peace negotiations, targeting Steve Witkoff, Elbridge Colby, Michael Domino. The DIA report also details Israeli military officers planting listening devices at DIA headquarters in 2021 and Shin Bet attempting to bug a Secret Service vehicle last year. One senior U.S. official described Israel's collection of American officials right now as unhinged. Israel and the White House are denying this. Also, a top former CIA analyst named Ken Pollock, who was involved in war games where he and the CIA back in the 90s identified that if Iran felt that there would be a serious effort at regime change against them by the United States, that they would immediately shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And Ken Pollock, this former CIA analyst, he's got a lot of sources on the inside, and he just went public doing this interview with a well-known reporter, Richard Engel, who does a good detailed podcast that I like to listen to. Here's what Pollock had to say about Benjamin Netanyahu wanting this exact outcome for decades, and Trump was the variable who was able to get Bibi or get Netanyahu to do this catastrophic invasion. Here, play this clip.
Bibi has more or less been singing this same song to every American president since George W. Bush, right? He's been saying the same thing for 25 years. The variable here is not Bibi, it's Trump.
And here is what Pollock said about the Strait of Hormuz. Play this clip.
Iran always had the capability to interfere with traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. Right? They never actually tried to shut it down. They never did because they were always terrified that if they did, the United States would come for regime change. We would decide this regime is beyond the pale. We have got to get rid of them because what they're doing is interfering with the global economy. So we got to take out the regime. And for that reason, they would never touch the Strait of Hormuz. Think about what Trump did. He kills Ayatollah Khamenei. He kills most of the military and internal security leadership the first night. He proclaims regime change. He says, we want a new regime. He says, I'm going to be the one choosing the new supreme leader of Iran.
I remember he said that we don't want regime change, but the regime has changed, I think is how he phrased it.
All kinds of stuff. But he makes it very, very clear that he is coming for regime change. So the Iranians then flip to their contingency. Their contingency is if the Americans ever do try to change the regime, then we close down the Strait of Hormuz. Right. And at that moment, what they learn is that shutting down the Strait of Hormuz is not going to cause the United States to try to overthrow the regime. It's going to cause the United States to back off from trying to change the regime. Trump is not talking about regime change at all. He has no interest in it. Right? That's the signal he has sent to the Iranian leadership. And we should also recognize this is a much worse version of this regime. We didn't change the regime, we changed the leadership, and this is a much worse version.
He also notes that Iran was not close to getting a nuclear weapon at the time the United States invaded this past February. Let's play it.
President Trump calls the 12-day war. I had seen nothing to indicate, and in fact, President Trump used to say that their nuclear material was buried deep, right? In fact, that's one of the problems we have now is people have talked about we need to get that material. They've talked about commando operations to go in and retrieve the highly enriched uranium. Well, those are impossible. They're ridiculous because it's all buried deep underground by these super penetrator munitions that we use to destroy the sites. And again, there was no evidence that the Iranians were excavating those sites, were trying to reach that material. This was always something I worried about. But there was no evidence of that. So before this war began in February 28th, there was no indication that the Iranians were anywhere near close to having a nuclear weapon.
Here's how he describes the war game that was done in the 1990s that he and other CIA analysts did, where they predicted everything that just went down. Here, play this clip.
So there is literally nothing that has happened in this war on the Iranian side, Richard, that I wouldn't have predicted, that 1,000 other experts on Iran would have predicted. The first time I participated in a war game that was about this, the Iranians closing the Strait of Hormuz, I think was in 1992. And the U.S. government does it over and over and over again. We plan, we prepare. The U.S. military is all over this. Right? They've thought it through in every possible respect. What the Iranians did was not unexpected at all. It was completely expected. It's what the United States did that was completely unexpected.
Well, when you say the United States, you mean President Trump particularly.
Yes.
Do you think there's any way, shape, or form that your former colleagues at the CIA missed this one?
No, I cannot imagine that they did. And the little bits of reports that we're getting is that they had in fact predicted this. As I said, all the evidence is that this is whatever the opposite of an intelligence failure is, this is that, right? This was every single step was called at every step of the way. But again, you had a president who believed what he wanted to believe, which was that regime change was easy, cheap, and eminently doable, likely to happen. But again, the U.S. government, forget about my war game. The U.S. government has been studying this for 30 years, right? Over 30 years. Understood this completely, understood exactly what was going to happen. I was able to predict everything that happened because I had been part of that community. And I know that other folks had as well. That was not the variable here. That was not the unknown here.
And then he talks about the CIA analysts and top intelligence officers and senior CIA officials who are now quitting. Here's what he has to say. Let's play this clip.
some who get the most frustrated, are leaving. And there certainly are people who are resigning. Very hard to know what the numbers are, but I know of some people who, friends of mine, longtime analysts, who just decided that, they were too frustrated. They parted ways. Others more or less kind of suffer in silence. They look for the opportunity. They hope that at some point the administration will realize that what it's doing isn't working, and therefore maybe we should see what the experts have to say, because maybe what the experts will say will actually work, given that what they're doing isn't.
Now, as I have been reporting as well, and Reuters got the initial exclusive, top U.S. spy agencies feud over turf. The CIA says it's not going to be sharing, or is saying internally it's not sharing information with ODNI, the Office of Director of the National Intelligence, believing that the ODNI is just completely compromised and not serving the American interest anymore. Just think about it. The CIA views the Office of Director of National Intelligence as basically a compromised entity, compromised and also filled with compromat. That's the entity that Trump wants Bill Pulte, the mortgage guy that he has, do all the criminal referrals to his political enemies for issues with their mortgages, purportedly. And Bill Pulte's now going to be running that agency. Also, as I've been reporting, about 28 former service secretaries and retired generals and flag officers sent this letter right here to the Senate, describing the dangers and the threats to the intelligence community posed by Bill Pulte. This is a really big deal. The undersigned include 28 former service secretaries and retired generals and flag officers who collectively served under every president from JFK to Joe Biden, based upon our leadership roles promoting the strength of the U.S. military and ensuring the security of the United States. We are deeply concerned by public reports that Trump is considering the appointment of Bill Pulte. The position of Director of National Intelligence is a serious role with real implications for U.S. national security. And it goes on to say, Mr. Pulte does not have any national security experience, let alone extensive expertise. And it goes on to say that he doesn't have the character to hold this job. With U.S. forces engaged in active operations abroad, there is no margin for error. And they describe how this is the worst time to have someone like a Bill Pulte be in this position. We're also learning as well, Israel's intelligence sources are accusing J.D. Vance of leaking Mossad plans to use Kurdish forces against Iran directly to Turkey's President Erdogan, who then lobbied Donald Trump to kill it. For Erdogan, he wanted no Kurdish military forces near Turkey's border. Trump vetoed the operation, and Israel claimed that it was Vance who leaked it. And so there are many who are wondering if Israel also has been spying on J.D. Vance, and if they have J.D. Vance's information. Also notable, RFK Jr.'s daughter-in-law reveals the reason that she quit working for Trump. She was a former top intelligence official. Her name is Amaryllis Fox Kennedy. Former intelligence official Amaryllis Fox Kennedy came clean to the Wall Street Journal in an exclusive published this past week why she stepped down. She was a former CIA officer. She held multiple jobs in the Trump regime. She served as Deputy Director of National Intelligence. She sat on Donald Trump's Intelligence Advisory Board and oversaw the spending of the CIA and 17 other agencies at the Office of Management Budget. She said that there are activities going on right now that are broken and corrupt and result in domestic political activities that no American would condone. She declined to go into detail on national security grounds, but claimed that actors within the U.S. intelligence agencies are using, quote, covert resources to affect political outcomes, is what she says. And a CIA spokesperson disputes Kennedy's claims, describing them as totally false. The CIA keeps its oversight committees fully and currently informed regarding agency resources and expenditures. But let's talk about The Trump goon unmasked as CIA gold hoarder's mentor, as the Daily Beast put it. A now former high-level CIA official accused of stealing $40 million in gold bars from the U.S. government has been linked to Donald Trump's billionaire deputy defense secretary. FBI agents last week seized 303 gold bars from Ashburn, Virginia, home of former CIA official David Rush. Rush, who claimed the gold was for work-related expenses, was arrested and charged with theft of public money. Agents also discovered $2 million in U.S. cash and 35 luxury watches, investigators say. Rush is accused of forging his education and military credentials. Rush had a years-long professional relationship with current Deputy Defense Secretary Steve Feinberg, the billionaire Trump backer who founded the private equity behemoth Cerberus Capital Management, sources told NBC. Feinberg has long been interested in the intelligence community. He was chairman of Trump's Intelligence Advisory Board beginning in 2018 during the Trump's first term and helped support Rush's career over the years. According to NBC sources, the men first met when Feinberg headed the board, which provides advice to the White House and spy agencies on intelligence collection. So there you have it. We'll keep you posted every step of the way. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to add the MeidasTouch podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new updates every single day.